Pritzker Family Foundation, Adolfo Hernandez. The CEO of the Knight Family Foundation, Sol Flores. The Executive Director of the Lohengrin Foundation, Mark Rodriguez. And the President and CEO of the Chicago Community Trust, Andrea Saenz. Today's moderator is the President of the Wood Fund Chicago, Michelle Morales.
Sorry, we're giggling and joking of how many Chicago folks are in the room. Hi.
Go out and bring everyone in.
Yeah, right. So just to give a little bit of context of today's session, and you probably read this in the session description, but the expanding presence of Latine leaders in Chicago's philanthropic institutions has been a significant development in the recent years. So I'm really excited about this panel. First of all, I encouraged all of them to be their normal, loud, hilarious selves, and for this to be sort of a conversation, right, these two right here, and for this to be a conversation amongst friends. But this panel is obviously featuring Chicago-based Latine executives and funders who will share their journeys into this leadership positions. And so, as we mentioned, this is Adolfo, that's Sol. Sol actually wanted me to correct, she's with the Knight Investment Partners, Mark, and Andrea. And so, for everyone who is up here on the panel, so why? What was your leadership journey? What brought you into the philanthropy? What's the why behind you being in philanthropy? And if you can share for the group, what was the trajectory of your leadership? And Adolfo, since you're next to me, we'll start with you.
Cool. Thank you, Michelle. Really excited to be here with half of the people we know in the room. That's amazing. I'm sorry if you've heard this story many times. I'll make something up to make it more interesting. But it's always important for me to say, born and raised in Little Village. These are all my cousins. Gracias, primos. Born and raised in Little Village, and both of my parents immigrated to Chicago in the 70s separately and landed in Pilsen. So that's always just an important part of my leadership trajectory. I'm a proud CPS student, Chicago Public Schools. I'm very proud of our public school system and our board member on the school district. And I spent 10 years in nonprofit organizing and advocacy work, and I learned a lot about what it takes to do meaningful work. After that, I spent 5 years working for the mayor's office as the inaugural director of an office focused on making Chicago the most immigrant-friendly city in the nation. And the reason I took that job was because my parents were undocumented. It was a platform and a chance for me to help people just like my parents. And I think I recognized it's a platform, doesn't define me. My values are my values, and that role gave me an opportunity to have an impact on people just like my parents. And I think what I learned during my time at City Hall and in organizing is you have these different stakeholders. You have private sector that has a ton of resources and its own set of values. You have philanthropy with a ton of resources, maybe some vision, maybe some leadership, not a ton of community experience. You have nonprofits and organizers, ton of vision, ton of energy, ton of experience, not always the most resources. And then you have government, which is, it's not incentivized to innovate or to take risks or to fail. But when you point all four of those sectors in the same direction, I literally believe that anything is possible. It's purely a matter of will and resources. So really, philanthropy to me is one of those players in that sort of pie or that nexus. I knew whatever I did next after working at the city, I wanted to be in that pie, trying to get all those sectors pointed in the same direction. So philanthropy is an incredible platform, but it's not the only platform through which we can have an impact.
Thank you. Sol?
That's great. Thank you, Adolfo. I'm going to just build a little bit on that. I, too, am born and raised in Chicago from parents and grandparents that came from Puerto Rico in the 1950s. And the daughter of a single mother. My father was a drug user, died when I was young, and I grew up in a family of activists and public servants. And so we were protesting and door knocking. You guys might say chupon, we say bobo, right? So I had my bobo, we were in the stroller, right? This is what I grew up, this is what I knew how to do. So it was not a surprise that I wanted to enter a life of public service. After completing school and doing a quick stint in the corporate sector, where I was often asked if I was the secretary, not the consultant, where I was often asked to go get the coffee, not to provide strategic value. I then got laid off and did what I knew how to do, which was go back and continue to be of service in my community. And through volunteering, I met a like-minded group of folks, and I became the founding executive director of a local nonprofit here in Chicago called La Casa Norte. And thank you. And it's an organization that works with young people and families experiencing homelessness. And I was employee number 1 and scared shitless and said, how do I do this? And how I do this was being with my community. And I led that work for 18 years and got to do incredible work walking alongside young people and families as they work to get the life of their dreams. I got to work on policy. We opened shelters. We got to advise politicians. We worked with corporate donors. I worked with and I'm clear about this, I worked with so many Republicans. I worked with so many MAGA Republicans, bringing resources, donations, and also understanding of this shared mission. I also ran for public office. And then in 2019, then candidate J.B. Pritzker asked me to be a member of his transition committee. And I'm going to share this really quickly because the important thing of being a part of a transition committee is not that fancy, glossy report. At the end of the day, it's how many resumes do you produce and how many names do you get on the list to be a part of that new administration. And I was sure as hell to put all the names that were on my list all the times were Black, Latine, LGBTQ, Asian, people with disabilities, nonprofit folks, organizers. Those were the folks who I encouraged this administration to hire. And a couple months later, he asked me to serve as Deputy Governor for Health and Human Services. And I oversaw a portfolio of $15 billion, 10 of the largest state agencies, and 15,000 employees. I had the privilege and honor of working alongside so many other public servants during this horrific pandemic, which we know really, really hurt and destroyed so much of our community, but also ripped off the Band-Aid around the continued work of racial equity that we have to do. I served in the Pritzker administration for 5 years, and then I had a pandemic baby. And I tried so hard, and as for people in this room who do identify as Latina, I always wanted to be a mother, and my motherhood journey was 7 years in the making. And so I said, I've done my public service. I have to take off time to be with my daughter. So I said, why don't I try this philanthropy thing? I'm just kidding.
Burn philanthropy.
Today I serve as the inaugural CEO of Night Impact Partners, and it is a local family foundation here who wants to do more. And the reason why I said yes to these very nice, white, wealthy people is because I want them to do the right thing. And they said, in me, well, Sol, you're our partner to help us get to do the right thing.
So for me, I mean, there's some similarities you hear across. It's this empowered kind of lived experience, right? My father, as parents of Sod, was involved in labor movements, was involved in the Humboldt Park riots. Kind of, it taught me about kind of mobilizing and thinking about change. Even for me, my story goes back to my own lived experience. I grew up in a little village. Adolfo, I didn't know you back then.
We're family.
But we're family. And it's a large Mexican community here in Chicago. I'm one of the few Puerto Ricans that grew up in a large Mexican community, honorary Mexican. And really, I mean, a product of the Chicago Public Schools, I experienced the dropout crisis in my high school. And the dropout crisis wasn't the crisis that I experienced directly, or that, you know, only 2 of 10 students were graduating from the high school. What impacted me was the teachers that were dropping out of that high school. And what impacted me was the ability for me to think, when I went to college, I don't have the foundational skills to compete, yet how did I graduate with honors, right, from this experience? So it's a number of lived experiences. Growing up, my brother was a gang member. growing up, seeing drive-bys, having a friend get paralyzed because she was shot. So really this connection with violence, with movements, and thinking about how do we create these changes and those lived experiences that shape who we all are. Each of you in the audience have lived experiences and can be in these roles. In addition to the lived experience, I have about 30 years of experience in both the nonprofit and the corporate sector. I worked starting up a number of startups, arts and culture, youth development, international development, education, and really this commitment to do right by our future generations and to have others not have to go the same experience that I went through, not have to think about what happened, why don't I have the same experiences that people that grew up in different neighborhoods have? So for me, it's a combination of these lived experiences that shaped my sense of my why, my purpose for doing this work, that drove me to do community organizing, that drove me to lead nonprofits, that drove me to start up and take my experiences into the corporate sector and to bring them back into the nonprofit sector. So really, it's a combination of those pieces about how the lived experience, professional experience, and the milestones of folks that helped influence me, including David Pisquera, who's going to be honored here, who really, let's give him a round of applause, who told me about kind of, mira, what about getting into philanthropy? And I was like, what is philanthropy? I got to raise some money. I'm running a nonprofit. At that time, there was a program at Loyola University helping to train folks in the sector, and that I signed up and did that. So it's all of those combinations of things.
So for me, I'll pick up with the philanthropy thought. You know, I grew up in an immigrant household. I was born in Quito. My family moved to LA when I was 5. And, you know, philanthropy at its most basic is people helping other people. And we did that every day, right? Folks helped me, my cousins, my parents' cousins took us in when we got here from Quito. They made sure we had a roof over our head. They made sure we had clothes. They made sure that my parents found jobs in LA. And then we got our own apartment and we did the same for my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, their friends, their friends' kids, whoever it was that needed help. My family would roll up our sleeves and do what we could, right? So we are all philanthropists. All of us who grew up in those kinds of households and those kinds of communities have been doing philanthropy since childhood. Yep. Yeah. It is a natural extension of who we are and how we were raised and our values. So I grew up in LA, not a lot of people from Ecuador in LA, so I'm an honorary Mexican too. And moved to Chicago about 20 years ago now. So I claim Chicago as home. I am a Chicagoan, but an adopted Chicagoan, unlike my friends here up on the panel. And throughout my working life, I have focused on education, workforce development, mostly for Latino communities, but then increasingly broadly took those lessons that I learned working with Latino organizations and community leaders to other places, to Chicago Public Schools, to Chicago Public Library, to the US Department of Education, and now to the Chicago Community Trust, with this real sense that those lessons, what we all need as humans to thrive, is common, right? Across communities, across identities. How we get there, how we sort of understand our role in society can vary quite a bit. And so my path really started when I was a kid at home, as I said, in high school and in college as a volunteer. I worked with immigrant organizations in Portland, Oregon when I was a college student at Reed. I worked with migrant worker organizations because I was bilingual and I could help, right? And that's how I was raised to be. And it wasn't until a few years after college when I'd been working in kind of boring temp jobs because I didn't have a lot of role models in my life about career planning and career paths. But I was spending all my weekend time and all my evening time as a volunteer. I lived in San Diego right after college, and I worked in a temp office job as a receptionist, which I found very boring, and I wasn't treated very well by the folks who, you know, had important jobs in that company. But on the evenings and the weekends, I volunteered with an organization called the Support Committee for Maquiladora Workers. It was an organization that organized mostly women on the Tijuana side of the border around, health conditions, around wages, organizing labor unions. And again, because I was bilingual, I could join these, people from the US who were interested in helping and go to Tijuana, and I served as an interpreter most of the time. And that started me on a path, and then finally discovered, hey, you can actually have this be your job, right? You can get paid to do community work, and that's what led me here.
Thank you guys so much for your stories, for sharing all the details, even about how your upbringing, et cetera. I'm going to focus the next question to Sol and Adolfo. So Chicago has about 9 Latine executives leading foundations. I also want to call out that Adolfo and Andrea lead two of the largest foundations in the city of Chicago. What do you guys think is enabling this type of representation in Chicago, right? Mariana and Alberto talked this morning about we're in the Midwest. Often the Midwest is the flyover, right, region. So what's going on in Chicago that's enabling this type of representation at the highest level of foundations?
When we thought about this question, my initial sort of gut feeling was thinking back to our incredible community organizing and our community leadership. So if you know Chicago, we have an incredible set of neighborhood-based community organizing and organizations, sometimes multiple in one neighborhood that are competing with each other. But to me, that's just leadership, people vying for and speaking on behalf of community and are from community. And that hasn't just happened in the last few years. That's been decades of work and leadership. And in some ways, Michelle, I think about it like the natural next extension are really 2. Running for office, which is exactly what the leader of a CEO of a nonprofit did, like building a base of power, of understanding of community, or philanthropy that interacts so much with nonprofit. And one of the challenges I think of philanthropy is when you don't have enough people in the space who have worked in nonprofit, who've been on the front lines, right, who understand how policy is made, it actually makes the work significantly harder. It's not impossible, but I think when you have people who have worked in the spaces that we're trying to identify how to invest in and how to elevate and how to strengthen, when you bring that kind of leadership experience, I think you can do the role much better and maybe more quickly. But I do think our incredible leadership development in community has been our pipeline, not just into philanthropy, but into government. And I think our last big leap is into the private sector. And I think we're afraid to talk about wealth creation through working in the private sector and having representation in CEO level roles in the private sector and in boardrooms. And I think 20 years from now, we'll have a panel like this that's really focused on the private sector in addition to our philanthropic leadership and our nonprofit and government leadership.
I think that's great. I mean, not much to add. I'll be a little bit more crass. It's about damn time, right? And I think all of the folks that he just described that have been working on the ground, I mean, this has been to build power and to take power, right? I mean, it is never going to be granted to us. And to be clear, white folks who have power are confronted. They are confronted, they are shamed, they feel obligated, and it is time to cede power. And for us to stand up and take it and say, yes, I can do it. Yes, I belong here. Yes, I have a point of view. And yes, your office, your organization, your company, your state government, your 501c3, or your foundation will be better because there is a Latine person leading the work.
We have some time, so Mark and Andrea, I wanted to see if you guys had anything to chime in.
I just want to say that I did do also a brief cameo appearance in one of Sol's campaign videos. I wanted to add that to my bio.
With her beautiful daughter.
My family was a walk-on role in one of her campaign videos. But what I would add, when we were talking about this before the session, one of the things that became clear was how much the relationships across sectors in Chicago really do contribute to our ability to move into these leadership roles. We are, as folks mentioned, really supportive of one another, really connected with one another, really endorsing of one another's leadership when it matters. And I don't think we should take that for granted. It's really important that we show up for each other that way, and that is happening in Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, she took the words right out of my mouth. It's really, even now in this role, not only is it important to have this support network, I can call any of them or any of the other leaders in this space to get questions, answers, resources. So it's really not only about us kind of building up and supporting one another, but also then thinking about how we build the next generation of leaders, right? The other folks and people like Davi and Yvette here in Chicago have done that for so many that have come into philanthropy now, and we have to continue to do that for the next generation. So when folks ask me to come and speak, I said, did you think about this person? Did you think about that person? Call this person, because I'm already in this role. I'm not looking to climb any more ladders. I'm looking to do good work with great people to make an impact and to drive change. But I'm also looking to build the next generation of leaders that are going to continue this work. And we need more Latina leaders. We need a greater representation in leadership roles at foundations, nonprofits, in government, in corporate sectors, hell, even the presidency, right? If we can get an orange guy in there, we can get somebody with a little melanin in our skin. So that's what I would say.
I think Mark's announcing he's running for president today. Yeah, Mark.
Adolfo's leading my campaign, right? Is leading the transition committee.
I really appreciate you all ending sort of that question on that note. I had a colleague once tell me that a mentor is someone that just will guide you, and a champion is someone who will speak your name in rooms when you're not there. Mm-hmm. And I just want to just say that this is a panel of champions, and I have also personally benefited from many people on this panel who have referred me, recommended me, thought of me for different things. And so to your point, right, that's how we ensure, right, that many more of us are in these type of positions.
Yeah, and while Michelle isn't getting to tell her story, what you need to know is that she is a badass Latina doing amazing things.
Thank you. So Mark and Andrea, I'll start with you. What does this level of representation mean for social justice philanthropy? And does it mean social justice? Does it mean that we'll see more of social justice philanthropy?
Well, I mean, for me, I can say at our foundation, we completed a strategic refresh in social justice philanthropy, movement building, all of that work is embedded in that. And I think when people like us, that look like us, that have the lived experience like us, we bring that perspective. We bring that influence into the dialogue, into the conversation. So I think we all have some community organizing background of some level, right? We know that it kind of gives you this foundational knowledge of how to mobilize, how to lead, how to facilitate, how to understand power, how it works. All of those things, and I think it has to lead to more funding for it. It has to lead to more support for leaders that are doing the work. And from my lens, it's critical to our strategy as we move forward. We have to continue this work. We have to continue la lucha. We have to be able to do it to continue to ensure that our communities are represented, they're getting the resources that they deserve, and they're not just looked at as the secretaries or the janitors or the waiters, right? And there's nothing wrong with those professions at all, but it's just that we also need to be able to do that. So I think, yes, I think there's more movement, especially with the Fearless Fund ruling and all those other pieces. We also have to work in allyship, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a key piece of that work is yes, we have to do more to move movements and move work and move social justice work. And us as Latinas that have the lived experience know that, and it isn't like anything that's mind-boggling for us. It comes to us naturally to say we have to support that.
I'd love to build on that from there. So when I joined the Chicago Community Trust, I joined as Chief Operating Officer. And my predecessor, CEO, was an African-American extraordinary leader. And together, we worked with the board and with the team to really shift the focus of the community foundations efforts to the racial and ethnic wealth gap in Chicago. That was a 1.5-year-long project where we engaged researchers, community leaders, other advisors to say, like, what is the biggest issue facing Chicago? Now, what I've asked myself a few times is, had I not been in that leadership role in the organization, would we have landed on a focus on not just closing the black-white wealth gap, but also the white-Latino wealth gap? Would that have happened, and would it have had the same weight? I don't know. Right? I don't know if it would or would not have. The data certainly would have led us down that path. What I do know is that representation alone is not it, but having the perspectives and the experiences I've had has helped us push ourselves as an organization to bring Latino partners and thought partners inside the organization, to focus on finding community leaders in Latino communities in Chicago that might not have otherwise had a way to connect into the foundation, whose work is incredibly important to the future of our city. And I do want to say, it doesn't mean that we are saying focus on Latino issues instead of Black community issues. It means that we have the opportunity to say our fates are intertwined and we must do this together. The issues that our communities face are not the same, right? We have unique challenges, we have unique characteristics, we have unique things. But the solutions we must find together, and we can't look for solutions that pit us against each other. That's how we've ended up at the bottom of every indicator of well-being in the city for decades. We can't get stuck here.
Yep.
Can I just add something?
Yeah, I'll go first one.
Yeah. I just wanted to add, there's the social justice component of philanthropy. I think for me, it's been important to think about accountability. Yeah. As a sector, who are we accountable to? Like in everyday practice, when you work at a nonprofit, you're accountable to your funder, you're accountable to government in some way. When you're in government, there's an election every 4 years, but in the interim, you should be accountable to people every day. In practice, how does it work? When you're at your foundation, who are you actually accountable to? How you're making your investments, who you're investing in. Are you transparent about your decision making? I mean, as leaders of organizations, these are the things that I know we're all wrestling with because we want to be transparent about decision making. We also want to be accountable to our partners, not just here's a check, you do your work, and this was our role. Our platform as Philanthropy is to do far more. It's to be advocates, to be champions, to be partners, to be allies, to shut up and listen sometimes, to speak loudly at other times. And I think that's part of like the social justice movement, is not just us as funding social justice movements. Right. What is Philanthropy's role within as a partner, as a support, and as an ally within that movement?
Sol, anything to add?
No, they did great.
Well, we have 12 and a half minutes left, so I'm going to create 2 additional questions. What's the favorite thing about your job? I know that being in leadership is challenging. It's lonely, right? You can list all the tough things, right? It is to be in a leadership position. But what are the wonderful things? What do you love about your role in your job?
Well, I'll start. I've been in the role for 6 months. So it's new for me, but I've been proximate to philanthropy for 25 years, right? And so when I started this, I was like, oh, I don't want to be one of those bees. I'm not going to be that crass.
Which ones?
I was real clear. Because I'd been treated like shit as a nonprofit CEO.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
I'd been treated poorly. I'd been disrespected, and my expertise in leading and being of community had not been honored. So I was clear when I came to this role that is not how I wanted to operate. And after working in government for 5 years, I was also very clear that not all of this sector, but a lot of this sector is completely blind to government public policy and the fact that government is the largest funder all the time, any day of the week, for anything that you care about. And so it is up to us, I think, and this is going to be my personal passion project in this work, is to really help build those bridges and fill the gaps, because government has zero time to do it. They have no time to wait for philanthropy to catch up, people. They're not sitting around twiddling their thumbs. But to answer directly your question, the thing that I've loved about my job is being able to bring all of that. And, you know, prior to saying yes to my trustees, we did strategic planning. And I said, if you're really serious, you have to do this through a justice equity lens. And that you're not going to hire me to do checkbook philanthropy, that we're going to be here together to truly impact equity, to truly make a difference. And I have, you know, two incredibly privileged white folks knee deep in the conversations with me, rolling up their sleeves, really personally challenged about their privilege and about structural racism in this world, in this country, how they've benefited from that, and what they can do to make a difference. And that I am loving, right? I am seeing their growth. I love it, not because I'm like, it's about damn time, but no, right? Because that would be petty. I'm not a petty person. I love it. I'm really not. I'm not. Fuck that guy.
You just settled scores.
But I love it because I get to extend grace, and the thing that Andrea talked about, all those values and all that stuff that got poured into us when our families came to this country and how our families have benefited, I now get to do that for this family on their journey of philanthropy. And I know that that will have ripple effects with their wealthy white children, with their wealthy white grandchildren, and with their wealthy white great-grandchildren.
You know, can I just say, so part of that, to me, has been the experience of the kindness and generosity of leaders who spent time with me when I started at the foundation 8 years ago. You know, I'm looking at Maria and Yvette, who were the first people to take me out to lunch and tell me how weird philanthropy is and how everyone's going to be my friend and people are coming for me. Yep. And I'm like, are you two coming for me? No, but they weren't. But they're like, Sol is. And I'm like, yeah, that's right.
I did.
She did. And she is. But, you know, that was such an incredible lesson for me to experience because they were so generous and kind and continue to be. So it's my responsibility to continue to do that for people who are younger than me or are just, you know, starting out in their career. And I think it's a really interesting thing for leaders to consider. When is it time to step aside to make space for new leadership? I hear some young people snapping. Cool. Tag me. And but also for young people, like there's an incredible energy and like an impatience, which is good. But there's also like what value can you glean from people who've been in this space for years, but keep your impatience. So I think that there's going to be natural tension, and I think don't view that tension as a bad thing. There are folks who have an incredible set of experiences that we can glean and learn from, but that impatience I think is wonderful for the sector. It's fantastic. We can do more. We can do it faster. We can do it at bigger scale. But I think that's the tension point. And I find like being right at right now in the middle of that tension point and having a responsibility on both ends feels like a lot of fun, and it feels like a lot of responsibility and really exciting given the incredible philanthropic community of Latinos that we have here in Chicago.
Yeah. Mark?
So I would say for me it's about learning. It's this learning journey you go on when you're meeting partners. It's a learning journey of how you bring your trustees along to really understand your lived experience and the experience of those you're trying to support. It's a learning journey when we're in the room with other thought partners to think about and look at an issue from a bird's eye view. You don't really get that from another place. When I led nonprofits, it was very tunnel vision about raising dollars to get to this mission, to do this work. In this role, you have a unique privilege to have this kind of outside look and this bird's eye view and to think about how does the ecosystem work? How do you address the policy pieces? How can you influence that? How do you support the groups on the ground? And how do you take and apply that listening and learning lens to everything you do to help kind of move the agenda forward, to move the needs of our communities that are lifted up by the same communities that we're hoping to support for me, it's about this learning process. Every day I'm learning something new. Every day I'm listening and learning something new from a grantee, from a partner, a co-conspirator over here, or others. Just really, that's been kind of really rewarding for me over the last 2 years in this role.
Andrea?
I, like Adolfo, am a true believer in the power of bringing together, private sector, public sector, philanthropy, and community. And I also believe we can do anything when we're all aligned across those sectors. And so for me, the most exciting thing about this role is being able to focus most deeply on the community leadership part of this, because my hypothesis, my poorly formed theory here, is that the reason we're not yet making the kind of progress we want to make on these issues we've been working on for decades is that the community voice has not been as loud as it should be on those collaborations and at the table with those collaborations. Yeah. So for me, the best thing about this role is being able to spend time with those brilliant community leaders across this city who are innovators, who are bringing heart and tenacity and just creativity and so much to their roles, trying to, grow economic development in their neighborhood, bring all kinds of services to folks who need them. And that being able to see that and be so up close to that every day inspires me, and it gives me really like the kind of energy that I feel I need when I'm talking to those wealthy white folks who are trying to figure out how they can contribute to making Chicago better. Bringing those folks together, those ingredients together, is really, in my view, the most exciting thing I've ever done.
What's your favorite part of
your
job?
Yeah.
Getting to work with us.
Michelle?
Oh, that's so celebrating panels. No, I love advocating. I think people in the room who have worked with me know that is my favorite part of sitting in the seat, is to be able to advocate using the lived experiences. It brings me back to my organizer roots. I think something you said, Andrea, we have the power to create tables. I mean, that's really a profound privilege of this role, is that we can create tables and we get to decide who comes to those tables. And I love that. That's my favorite part of the job. And so it was an unexpected part of the job, but my favorite part of the job. So what makes Chicago special, y'all? Why this beautifully complicated city of ours? What makes it so special?
Folks who are at these front tables here, all the Chicagoans here, and what they represent, the partnership, the real willingness to work together. I don't think everybody I talk to across the country says that they don't experience that outside of Chicago. Yeah. The willingness to put aside your ego, your self-interest, and do things together. It's extraordinary.
And to really, to lift people up. Other folks they talk to in other places talk about how it's challenging, how some folks maybe get in leadership roles and forget about the others, and they're moving elbows, hitting elbows. And here we're really trying to lift each other up, and people reach out and they're authentic, and this is real. We all have this collective vision for a better city and for a better community and for a better kind of system and environment for your daughter to grow up in, right? And for our children and our next generation to grow up in. So for me, it's this kind of unified collective push towards lifting up La Gente to move forward the cause.
Yeah, we survived these winters. So, I just, you Californians, you got nothing. You got nothing on us. All that damn sunshine has made you weak. It's made you weak. You put a Chicagoan against a New Yorker, a Californian, a Floridian, a Tejana any day of the week, and we will hold our own.
This is our example of lifting people up.
She said, what makes Chicago great?
Tough love.
It's true.
I mean that, right? That's what makes Chicago great. I'll say this, yes, we lift each other up. We're a deeply competitive city. As you can hear, when you're from here, we bleed the city. We are of it, and I'm sure you'll find this when you interact with people. We're from Chicago, and we'll defend it, even if you don't insult it. We'll just try. Well, are you trying to start a fight? But I will say, within the city, I mean, the not great part of it, the story is like we're one of the most gentrified cities in the country. Yep. And it's forced our communities to learn how to advocate, how to organize, and how to build power. And I think we still are wrestling with how do we be allies across community, because we can see that many of our destinies are intertwined and our interests are the same, but literally we've been pit against each other. Yep. And so it's our job to get ourselves out of that, but it's also sharpened our elbows. It makes us really focused on how to win and how to build power. And I think that's also incredibly beautiful. And there's a lot to celebrate. Walk down Humboldt Park, Division Street and Paseo Boricua, walk down 26th Street and La Villita, walk down 18th Street, South Chicago, East Side, Logan Square. Every neighborhood will give you a different taste, but it's deeply, deeply Chicago. Even though they're all different, we recognize them as deeply unique and all part of the same fabric of our city.
Mm-hmm. Any last words of any advice for anyone in the room who's aspiring to become a foundation CEO or a foundation president?
Relationships are critical. We haven't talked about it yet,
yeah.
But the relationships you build with colleagues, with donors, with board members, with all that is critical, and it's powerful.
Mm-hmm. I agree, and everyone counts. The person who doesn't have power today, as well as the person who has power today. This is why I'm very nice to 18-year-olds, because they're gonna give me a job one day.
Lift everyone up. Lift everyone up.
There we go.
Well, can we please have a round of applause for this amazing panel? Thank you.